it is all a journey. So first, you're constantly trying to understand what are the most important questions here, and what are the most important methods I can develop with my characters to answer those questions. You see, I like that you call it cinema verite, because the film is very much standing on the shoulders of a filmmaker like Jean Rouch, who first coined the term. In that and what Jean Rouch and I do, which have in common, is a creation of is an intervention in reality, and allowing the characters to create stories, to create fantasies, so that you don't just document you don't just simulate a documentation of a pre-existing reality, which is what direct cinema does. You actually, and I think it's ironic, because in English, direct cinema and cinema verite are two words that are often used interchangeably, but they really are opposites. In cinema verite, you let people fantasize, you let people act, you let people make up stories, and you make visible the role of fiction, fantasy, storytelling in our real lives. So you see, and I think in the act of killing, I spent after Adi and the survivors encouraged me to keep filming the perpetrators in order to expose a whole regime built on impunity. I spent 2 years filming every perpetrator I could find, and feeling entrusted by the survivors and the human rights community, almost feeling like an agent of theirs, to do something that they could not safely do themselves. I filmed every perpetrator I could find. I worked my way up the chain of command from this small, isolated plantation village to the city of Medan and beyond, to Jakarta, to retired army generals, to retired CIA officers living outside of Washington, D.C. In fact, everybody was boastful. Everybody was open in a similar way. And I began, after maybe the third or fourth person would meet me in their house and then say, hey, I can take you to the place I killed. And then when they take me there, they would spontaneously start demonstrating how they killed. After that, I realized I'm getting something much closer to performance than to testimony. And performance is always is intended to do something. And the question is, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to perform? And I don't mean, and I'm speaking almost to performance in the sense of like Austin's speech act theory, not performance in the sense of theater, but performance in the sense of performing an action, doing something in the world. Performance is also always intended for an audience. And the question was, who is their imagined audience? How do they want to be seen? How do they think I see them? How do they think their grandchildren see them? How do they think the world will see them through my footage? How do they really see themselves? And to try and answer those questions long before I met Anwar, I started proposing really the core cinema verite intervention of my work, which was to say, look, you have participated in one of the biggest killings in human history. I want to know what it means to you and to your society. You want to show me what you've done. And you see, I could be this open with them because they were that open with me. So go ahead, show me what you've done in whatever way you wish. I will film your reenactments or your dramatizations, but I will also film you and your fellow Death Squad veterans discussing what you should show and what you should leave out in order to show how you want to be seen, what this means to you, what this means to your society. And so in that sense, they knew from the outset they're not making a separate film, they're only making scenes for my film, and there was no this effort of this invitation of this invitation to dramatize was not intended to trick them into opening up. On the contrary, it was a response to their openness, a way of trying to, and a way maybe of trying to get them to reveal the emotions that are hiding or that are maybe being banished or displaced by these boastful performances. And so when I met Anwar Congo, he was the 41st perpetrator I filmed, and he was no more boastful or shocking than any of the others. The very first day I met him is the day he takes me to the roof in the beginning of the act of killing and dances the cha-cha-cha after showing me how he killed people with 1,000 people with wire in that very spot. And I had this feeling when I saw that actually what was unique about Anwar was not the dancing, was not the boasting, but was the pain. That he couldn't hide. He was not as capable of hiding his pain, his trauma, as the others. And I realized something that in hindsight is obvious to me, but is not obvious to most people and wasn't obvious for a while, which is that the boasting is not a sign of pride. It's defensive, it's denial, it's desperate attempt to try and dispel the pain that inheres, is present, or attends the memory. So so Anwar arrives on this rooftop and says, "Look, there's many ghosts here because everyone died unnaturally. There was so much blood here. I have to show." And then, as though to sort of forget that, he says, "I have to show you what I did." Maybe he's also trying to make a confession in a way. Then he actually shows me how the victims would die in the scene where he dances the cha-cha-cha. You'll notice a perceptive viewer will notice he has wire around his own neck when he's dancing the cha-cha-cha. That's because after showing me how he killed, he says, "Now I must show you how the victims died." And he would show me how as though he was haunted by it. And then he says, "This would all make me go crazy if I think too much about it." And so I would go out drinking, taking drugs, dancing. "Look, I'm a good dancer." And though, as if to dispel the pain that he's just felt, he starts to dance. And I realized that the boasting and trauma were actually two sides of the same coin. And to explore that, I started a process. The next intervention, if you like, cinema verite intervention that I hadn't done yet, which started a process with Anwar, which took 5 years, which was to show him that footage, wondering, what will he recognize? What will he be capable of consciously articulating in response to the mirror of the footage? Will he recognize the pain that he's running away from? Or will he try and further escape? And he says he looks very disturbed when I show him that footage of himself on the roof. He looks like he absolutely sees that it's something terrible, but he doesn't dare say, this is awful. He doesn't even dare say, "This makes me look bad and I don't want to do this anymore," because even to say that would be to admit that it was bad. And so instead he says, "What's wrong is my costume and my acting." And he proposes an embellishment, an improvement, a quote-unquote improvement in the scene, as though if he can fix the scene aesthetically, he can fix it morally. And we just kept repeating that same process, dramatizing, screening. Each screening would beget the next dramatization. And gradually the scenes became more and more surreal, inspired by Anwar's favorite Hollywood genres. They became more and more powerful and absurd and surreal metaphors for impunity, and they became more and more desperate and doomed efforts to escape the moral truth that he's confronted with every time he dramatizes. And ultimately, those fiction scenes become a kind of prism through which he sees the moral meaning of what he's done. Not surprisingly, since I think what's motivating him throughout the process is a need to confess, a need to tell the story to tell me about his nightmares and his pain, and equally a need to run away from that through proposing ever more absurd dramatizations.